So, the IRS is a private collection branch for the Federal Reserve. That's what they do. They collect for the private Federal Reserve. Now, take a look at this. The IRS doesn't collect money for the government. They're a private trust domiciled in Puerto Rico. And you can look it up yourself. Let's read this. In 1953, the Internal Revenue was created by the stroke of a pen when the Secretary of the Treasury changed the name of the Bureau of Internal Revenue, Treasury Order number 150-29, G.M. Humphrey, Secretary of the Treasury, July 9, 1953. However, no congressional or presidential authorization for making this change has been located. So, the source of the authority had to originate elsewhere. Research to which IRS officials have acquiesced suggests that the Secretary exercised his authority as trustee of Puerto Rico Trust number 62, Internal Revenue. And you can see this in Title 31 of the U.S. Code, Section 1321. Look it up yourself. And as will be demonstrated, the Secretary does, in fact, operate as Secretary of the Treasury, Puerto Rico, which is a territory. It's not even a state. Puerto Rico, as a territory, is managed by the United States in Washington, D.C., the corporation. United States, the corporation. Now, one thing you may not be aware of is that the Secretary of the Treasury of the United States does not receive his paycheck from the United States federal government. He is paid by whom, do you know? By the IMF, the International Monetary Fund. So, what's this telling us? The treasurer of the United States is paid by foreign interests. The people you pay your so-called taxes to in the IRS, that money actually, well, number one, doesn't even touch the floor of U.S. government offices. So if you think you're paying for roads and bridges and schools and health centers and justice systems and armies and military and everything else with your taxes, I'm sorry to tell you, not one penny is going to anything that benefits the people. It's going straight into a private trust, which is managed by a combination of the IMF, a federal corporation known as the Federal Reserve Bank, and that ultimately ends up with the Queen of England or the Vatican. So, you want to pay your taxes? That's your choice. It's entirely your choice. All right? So, you say to yourself, well, crap. I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm not going to pay my taxes if that's where it's going. Well, I'm sorry. You're hooked by the agreements that you've made. You've made admissions and confessions in the applications that you've signed that you are a charter member of this corporation known as the United States. Nothing to do with the government. And you're regulated by commerce. You're engaged in commerce. You're wrapped up by contracts. And unless you do something about that, you're stuck. You're hooked. You're not getting off the hook. We've got agreements in place. So this is the dilemma that we find ourselves in, right? So we go back to all those contracts that you signed with the Social Security application and those type of things. And there's a process for basically putting the people, the counterparties to those contracts on notice that you have uncovered their fraud, you know what it is, you are stating the fraud, you are putting them on notice that you are no longer participating in the fraud, and that you consider that original contract null and void, nunc pro tunc. Okay, now for then, as from the beginning.